So in this case, we're going to, in today's lecture, it will be centered on data gathering and also analysis. So that is what we're going to talk about today. So quickly, I'm going to share the screen on that. That is chapter 4. Right. So let's dive right into chapter 4. So let me reduce this thing. So, great. Now, capturing data, there are methods and certain things that you need to consider whenever you are capturing data or getting information from your stakeholders or from people that are going to use your application. One thing that you could have in mind is multiple data capture. There is one thing that there are a few things that you should have in the known. Now, there are various options that we can use to capture data, and this includes notes, audio recordings, photographs, and video. So these can be used individually, or we can combine any of these, either 1, 2, or 3. You can have a combination of them, 2 or 3 combination of them, depending on the nature of the research and information that we really would want to capture when it comes to data gathering. Now, there are some consideration of the nature of the information and the research goals that we also would have to have in mind. So in this case, when deciding on a data capture method, it is always essential to consider the nature of the information which we will be capturing and the research goals that goes into the research that we will conducting. So there are different methods that we can use, and we can explore all these methods in capturing different aspects, such as the textual details, the visual context, the spoken conversation, or maybe some sort of dynamic interaction. So in terms of the alignment and the research objectives, we normally delve into determining which method or combination of methods best align the research objectives. So for instance, if the goal is to maybe capture the opinion or the nuances of verbal communication, audio recording might be the preferred option. So if it's a visual representation that we want to use, or visual representation is actually crucial in the capturing of data, then it means we can go in for the option of maybe a photograph or a video. Those two options will be more suitable when it comes to the approach that we want to use to capture our data. Now, in spite of all these, there are challenges and advantages of using any of these methods that has been outlined. And when we talk of the notes, if we should pick notes as the method that we want to use to capture data, of course, it does have some advantages, and it also has some disadvantages too. The advantage here is that it is ideal for capturing textual information. And this usually facilitates the ease of review of questionnaire or the text that we've given to our stakeholders. So one thing that you should always have in mind is when it comes to notes, its advantage is it's ideal for capturing textual information. And by doing so, it helps in facilitating easy review. That is one good advantage of using notes. Now, there's a challenge or a drawback here in that it lacks visual content. And this, of course, might be limiting in some situation. You know how most people don't like to read. If your questionnaire or if your method of capturing data is full of text, people might not be so interested in, reading through your questionnaire or the method that you want to capture data. So that is the drawback of notes, using notes. The other approach that we can use to capture data is photograph. So for photograph as a way of advantage, it normally provides a visual representation of a moment or a scene. So it means what you capture is more or less going to be static. There'll be less interaction when it comes to that. We normally say a picture is worth 1,000 words. But of course, yes, in this case, if you compare the notes and the photograph, a picture could be one of the a better approach compared to the notes. But of course, you have to always be thinking about the research objectives that you're working on before you make a decision whether to combine notes and photograph, or maybe go for notes alone or use photograph alone. So for the advantage of a photograph, we are able to get some sort of visual representation of the moment or a scene. Now, each challenge or drawback is limited in capturing dynamic interaction and may not really convey the full context of the information that we really want to describe or what we really need. So photograph is a method we can use to capture data. But that is the disadvantage, the limitation in capturing dynamic interaction. And of course, because we're unable to capture dynamic interaction, we may not be able to convey the full context or get the full context of what we want to, we're actually trying to achieve in our objective. Now, if you consider the third one, which is audio, as a different method of capturing data, it also does have some sort of good advantage, or has some sort of advantage, mainly because it's ideal for capturing spoken conversations, verbal nuances or verbal opinions, and also ambient sound. So we can, when you're gathering data using the audio as a means of capturing data, there's a huge likelihood that you will not miss any parts of the data collection or data gathering, like the audio that you hearing me speak. And once I have it, maybe if Zoom gives you the chance to Zoom always gives you an audio version and a video version. If I should put up the audio version in there, every spoken word would be available for you to listen without having to maybe read or think about a picture that is not able to capture dynamic interaction, and thereby not being able to convey the full text. All right, so that is a very good an advantage of using audio as a means of gathering data. Now, the challenge here is that audio does not provide a visual element, and transcribing the audio can be time consuming. Now, with the introduction of AI, if you want to, get even the audio of maybe my lecture, for instance, because my lecture is on YouTube, you can always put up there. Okay, sorry, I was disconnected, but I'm back now, so I think we can continue. Yes, where was I? Yes. So I just spoke about the audio. Don't worry, I'll merge the files, the two videos. I think the Zoom went off, so I'll merge this video and the other one. So I'll put it up for you guys. Okay, so let me see. But let me find out. Can you see my screen and can you hear me? Thank you very much, Kweku and everyone. Raphael, thank you. Yes, so, all right, thank you, Albert. So I think we can continue. Yes, so that is about audio. Now, the advantage for the audio is ideal for capturing spoken conversation, vocal opinions or nuances, and also the ambience sound. We're able to capture the background sound of whatever is happening. Now, the challenge for using audio as a method of capturing data is that it does not provide a visual element. As I was saying, transcribing the audio can be time consuming. So if you are maybe an ACID individual who does data capturing, they've built your questionnaire and you use the approach of audio, and you are not a computer savvy person, then it means right after the interview or right after the interview that you conducted to get information from your people or the stakeholders, you need to sit down and each listen to it and transcribe it into text before maybe you can make very good information out of it, possibly. So there's a challenge, gathering data using audio too. Although it's good, it has its also disadvantage, and that is it doesn't have a visual element, and it's when you want to transcribe the audio that you have gotten, it's time consuming transcribing it. But now, as I said, there are AIs or artificial intelligence prompts and stuff, or applications that are able to do some of these transcription for you. Some might be for free and so on. Now, the final one, which is video, as a way of also capturing data. It also has its advantage and disadvantage. The advantage is it offers rich visual and also auditory information. Well, auditory we mean to say sound. We're able to get some sort of visual and also auditory information from just a minute. Yes, auditory information from a video. So in that case, we're saying that for its advantage, it offers visual and auditory information, and also it's mainly good in capturing dynamic interaction. If you want to have some sort of dynamic interaction, you're able to see exactly what is happening. Unlike the picture, we only see a static visual element. But with a video, we see some sort of dynamic interaction in here, which is being captured here. But of course, it also has its disadvantage. The advantage is it requires more storage and also processing power. The video that is happening right now, if I'm to get it downloaded for you, you can see how big it is. And the size might be quite big compared to that of a picture or a note or the audio. So the video, because it takes more processing power from the computer or a way of from the computer, and also you need more space to be able to put up the video. It always has this limitation. Let me reduce my sound. So that is a limitation of using the video. And when it comes to analyzing video data, it can be time intensive. Now, the video that has been cut right now, because of my internet connection, when I'm merging these two videos with a software like Shortcut, SHOTCUT. I'm sure some of you might have used it before. If I use it to edit this video by merging these two, the moment I tried rendering it and putting it together, it's going to take some amount of time just to process this before I can merge these two. So video, although is a good method of gathering data, it also has its disadvantage. You need to have enough space and also processing power. So in conclusion, on the method and also consideration for capturing data, the choice of data capture should be driven by of the subject matter or the research that we are working on. And in doing so, we are able to balance the advantage and also the challenges which are associated with any of these methods that are being used to capture data. Now let's talk about interviews. Interviews could be in these form. So interview as a valued research method. Interviews are considered as a valuable research method for gathering data. So in this case, they allow researchers to directly interact with participants. And by interacting with participants, they're able to gain in-depth insights into the perspective and also the experience and opinion of these participants. In our case, we probably would say respondents. When you're administering a questionnaire, we normally use the word respondent. Now we have about 4 main types of interview approaches that we can go in for. We have the structured interviews, we have the unstructured interview, semi-structured, and also the focus groups. Now let's try and talk about each one of them. With a structured interview, usually there is some sort of flexibility and richness when it comes to the unstructured interview. That is the first one. We have this sort of flexibility and also richness when it comes to the unstructured interviews. Unstructured interviews usually provide flexibility, and most times they allow for an open-ended question and also spontaneous responses. So when it comes to the unstructured, we are able to have an open-ended question given out to the respondent for them to make a selection of the choices. And there are other times too, we also give them the chance to also tell us their opinion about certain questions that we give them. This approach usually enhances the richness of the data, as in this case, the participants can express themselves freely. If you make it open-ended, then it means they are not limited to maybe a specific answer. In this case, it is unstructured in a sense that the questions that have been given, you give them the chance to answer the question in whichever way that they want. So in that case, for open-ended questions, we could have, is my voice too low or is better? I'm sorry, is it better? All right, thank you, Emmanuel. Right. So for unstructured interview, it usually provides flexibility in the sense that it allows the participants for open-ended questions and also spontaneous responses. Open-ended means you don't restrict the respondents or the participants to the answers of the question. This approach is very good, and it usually enhances the richness of the data that the respondents can give. And this is because they are able to express themselves freely. However, there is a catch in here. When you go this approach, you should be mindful that you will have some sort of lack of standardized format. And in this case, it makes it challenging to replicate this interview process across different participants or study. When you do it, you conduct an unstructured interview. Of course, the formats that you will give out and the responses that you get, it makes it a little difficult to to replicate this particular type of approach or process across a different set of maybe participants or respondents in the study that you probably will conduct. When you move on to the other type of interview, which is the structured interview, which is the second one, there is some sort of good thing that comes in here, because in this case, it's the key elements here that relates to the structured interviews is replicability, but the potential sacrifice of richness. For unstructured, we have the flexibility and richness. For structured, we have replicability, we're able to replicate what we have, but we don't have the potential, we normally sacrifice the richness of it. So in this case, a structured interview usually involves a predetermined set of questions, which is normally asked in a standardized manner or way. So this type of formats usually enhance replicability, as the same question can be posed to each participant. So in this case, and give the question to, we can ask any of the respondents a question, we give them the option to make a choice, and we can replicate this particular type of approach. Now, this approach also has its limitations in the sense that the structured nature may limit the depth of the responses and the richness of the data that we get from these respondents. So it can be less accommodating to unique participants in this way. So there is some sort of difference between the structured and the unstructured. Now, when we move on to the next one, which is the semi-structured approach of or kind of interview, the key thing that we normally think of is the balance between richness and also replicability. This is mainly because with a semi-structured interview, we strike some sort of balance between the flexibility and also the structure. So in this case, the researcher have some sort of core questions, but can also explore additional topics or follow up on the interests of based on the responses that he gets. So in this method, we normally have give room for depth in responses. So we would want the respondents to probably give us more information about what they are doing while maintaining some level of maybe replicability in this particular approach. The fourth one, which is the focus group, the key thing that we normally associate with the focus group is interactive discussion and also diverse perspective. Of course, for a focus group, it means you have so many people coming together, all of them. It's more centered on a discussion. And in this case, we can have diverse perspective of, people's understanding on the subject matter. So for a focus group, it involves group interviews with multiple participants simultaneously, giving out their opinion. So this particular format of interview encourages some sort of interactive discussion and also the exchange of diverse perspective amongst these participants or respondents. It can provide insight into group dynamics and also share experiences. Now, selecting interview methods is always based on research goals. You just don't get up and choose any of these approach, to conduct interview. You always need to base on the selection on the research goals. So the choice of the interview methods should align with the specific research goal and the desired level of the structure which you are going in for. So in this instance, if the aim is to gather details, maybe personalized insights about the respondents, you probably might have to think about an unstructured or a semi-structured interview. These ones are more suitable when it comes to an approach like that. If you want to get or gather detailed information and also personalized insights about the respondents, when you go the unstructured or the semi-structured approach of interview, that would be the best way to go. Because in that case, it is open-ended. You are able to get more information from the participants, and you also would be on focus when it comes to research goals. So if the goal is also to compare responses systematically across respondents, then you should think of a structured approach. By the structured approach, you always would, most of the time a close-ended way of questionnaire. So if it's closed-ended, you always would have some answers provided to the participants to make a choice. Of course, it also has its limitations. So in summary, when you think about interviews, the key is to align the interview method with the research objective, the objectives that you are embarking on, or the approach that the research that you're embarking on. You have to consider the trade-off between the flexibility and also the replicability. If you want to go in for flexibility, then of course you have to start thinking about the fact that unstructured might be the best option. If you're also going in for replicability, then of course it will be good to go for the structured approach, which is the approach for interview. All right, so that is about the interview. Now, there are so many interview questions that goes in there. When you are gathering data, there are certain questions that you need to ask. Now, I've already spoken about open and close, but I would want to delve much into it. When we have the close-ended and also the open-ended, there are some advantage and also disadvantage to each one of them. Let's pick the first one, which is the close-ended questions. So usually when you hear of the close-ended questions, we normally have a predetermined answer format. That is the close questions or close-ended questions. We always have a predetermined answer format, which is often in a limited set of response options. So an example could be, what is your gender? Then we give the option male, female. So that is a close-ended question. So that is how, okay, since somebody has the hand up, let me see who that person is. Okay. Yes, Kwame.
Yes, sir, you were talking about replicability, and then I was asking, in terms of the interview, what does it mean in replicability? Like, what does
Okay.
it mean with the interview questions?
All right. Yes. When we talk about the replicability, when you conduct an interview, so for instance, if we go the approach of the close-ended question, you see how easy it is to give the same question to another set of individuals, because the responses that you are giving, that you are getting from the participants is fixed to the answers that you have provided. So for instance, if the question is given to maybe people in Ghana, we can replicate the same questionnaire to possibly people maybe in the US based on the answers that we have given. Usually for the replicability, it is more centered on the fact that we use a closed-ended type of questions. That is where the structure comes in. I don't know if you understand, you get my point. You can let me know. So that is where the replicability, being able to replicate the questions or the questionnaire that we give to different type of people. But for the open-ended, the answers that possibly one geographical or ethnicity or group of people will provide, definitely we can't replicate that same question to a different set of people who are not in the same locality or the questions that we are looking for. I don't know. Okay, I think you have. All right, so that is the replicability aspect of it. I believe Kwame understand. I think, yeah. So we should, when it comes to replicability, think of the fact that the questions that we have, can we give it out to a different set of a different group of people who are not in the same locality as we are? If that is the case, if it's a close-ended, then it means we fix those people to the answers that we have. So in that case, we can replicate the same question to different sets of people, and that would also work. All right, so let's continue. Let me pull this. Yeah, so for the close-ended, as I'm saying, we have predetermined answers that have been outlined for the person to make a choice. So often we normally have limited set of responses options given to the respondent. So they have no option than to make a choice in there. So an example that I gave was, what is your gender? You are either male or female. So if you are any other person apart from a male or a female, you don't have the option to select. So in that case, excuse me, if you are maybe a hermaphrodite, maybe you probably pick the dominant part and make a choice in there. Now, the advantage of using, the close type of questions. And the reason is it is easier to analyze in terms of analyze quantitatively. For such questions, because we are picking up answers based on what we have given to the respondents, they are forced to make a choice. So it makes it easier to also serialize the answers that we get. So for instance, if the question is gender and we are given the option male or female, the person would select, if the person selects male, male could be 1 when we are maybe gathering the data, and female could be 2 for that particular question. Those of you who have used a software called Statistical Package for Social Sciences or Predictive Analysis for Social Sciences, usually it's an IBM software. IBM acquired that particular software. Most people use it for analyzing their questionnaires. So that is SPSS. I'm sure some of you might have heard of SPSS. It's been a while I used that. It's actually a free software which people can use to analyze their data. I think people are still using the software. But now, the advent of AI in our current dispensation, you can see everybody is using AI to also analyze their data. You can still use PSW or the SPSS software to do some of these things. All right, so for open-ended questions, I think I would want to be very fast because I have just about 30 minutes. I want to finish today's lecture. So for open-ended questions, it allows for a broader range of responses. And in this case, we encourage the interviewee or the participant to express themselves in their own records or in their own words. So a question like, we can ask a question, not give them a chance to make a selection, but we listen to their responses. So they are able to respond to the question in their own words. So usually it provides richer qualitative insight. Of course, if your questionnaire is open-ended, then it means you have lots of work to do. If you want to quantitatively, analyze it, then it means you need to go through all the responses of your participants or of your respondents and see the ones that are very closely related, the answers that are closely related. Then you code each of them, you group them, and you code each of them before you can make, you can convert into and analyze quantitatively. You can actually quantitatively analyze this particular type of question. So although we're able to gather good information from or good responses from our respondents, it has its limitations. You should always be thinking about that when you think of the interview questions that you create. Now, consideration in formulating questions. For close-ended questions, there are things that you have to consider when you are formulating questions in this area. You always have to make sure that you provide useful factual information. So there is a useful for specific and factual information. And also when you use close questions, we normally employ it's we can employ it when we want to be quick, want to be specific in the answers that we're looking out for. So, but for open-ended, it is usually ideal for exploring opinions, experiences, and also somehow gets the responses, in-depth responses of the respondents. So in gaining in-depth insights from these respondents, you can go in for an open-ended question. And when you do use this approach too, it normally encourages the interviewee or the participant to also share their perspective on a subject matter and also provide detailed response of what they think on that particular subject matter. So you should always find a way to avoid the pitfall in question formulating. And these are some of the interview questions that you should always find a way to, to avoid. So make sure you avoid pitfalls in question formulating. And the first one is the long questions. Nobody would want to read an entire paragraph before you can answer a question. So such long questions are usually not the best of options. You should always make sure you keep the question concise and also you focus and also focus to be able to prevent the confusion and also ensure clarity when it comes to the question that you are asking the respondent. Now for compound sentences, find ways to, when you have a question like that, which is quite long, you can split the compound question into 2 or more separate questions for better clarity and also for more precise response. The use of jargon and also complex languages is not really advisable. You always make sure you use languages that is clear and easily understandable to the respondent or the interviewee to avoid misunderstanding. So you always put yourself in the shoe of the interviewee and avoid unnecessary jargons that we normally use because you are possibly the developer of the application or whatever. You want to put up these huge terms and jargons. Always try to let it go. Don't formulate your questions around areas like that, jargons and these complex languages, and stop using misleading questions. Avoid questions that suggest preferred answer or assume certain information. It's not the best of ways, and this it's not really good when you have leading questions. So you always find a way to opt for neutral phrasing to elicit unbiased responses. Now, unconscious biases also does come in. So you should always be mindful of these biases that relates to gender, race, and other factors, and formulate a question that do not perpetuate any stereotype. We have to be careful when you are asking some of these questions. So you have to be mindful about that. It's unconscious, but you have to be mindful of the way you formulate such questions. So examples of leading questions. An example of a leading question could be something like this. So instead of asking a question like, why do you like maybe product X? You can suggest a positive opinion and ask a more neutral question like, what are your thoughts on product X? When you say, what are your thoughts on product X? You are not leading the respondents into accepting the product that you like, unlike saying, why do you like product X? So think of the way you coin your question and make sure they are not leading questions. So the goal here is to create a comfortable and open environment for the interviewee to be able to share their thoughts and also their experiences when it comes to answering of questions without them feeling influenced by the wording of the questions. They should be free to be able to express themselves and give you good responses that will make your analysis, look more legit. So this approach usually helps in obtaining a more genuine and also unbiased responses during the interview process. So these are very key, and make sure you avoid all these types of approaches or pitfalls in coming out with your questions when you are coming out with your questions. Now, your outline steps for running an interview or maybe a well-structured approach to gather data and also to gather maybe data and also analysis running the interview. You have to find a way to demonstrate a thoughtful approach to the data gathering process. So I would want us to go through each one of these phases. So for the introduction, some of these are self-explanatory. So, but I will we want to recap it quickly. So in terms of introduction, there are some key things that you should have in mind: the purpose and the components. These are very key. So when you are introducing, you are gathering data, analyzing, or running the interview under introduction, you should have a purpose. And having a purpose, you should find a way to establish a professional and also an ethical starting points for the interview. So that is very key. That is during the introduction phase. And still under that, in terms of components, there are certain things that you should, but mainly 5 main things that you should think through during the introduction phase. So these are the components. We have the self-introduction, the interview goals, the ethical consideration, the recording request, and the information consent form. You always would have to, go through these components with the interviewee for them to accept and be willing to, tell you more or accept the interview that you're going to conduct with them. So under self-introduction, you always find a way to establish credibility and also provide the context about yourself. You should let them know who you are and be credible. You are more or less gaining the trust of the interviewee to be able to give you good responses or the actual fact of what they feel about the questions that you ask. So you also spell out the interview goals. In doing this, you clearly communicate the purpose of the interview to the participants. In terms of the ethical consideration, you make sure you address any of the ethical consideration by ensuring confidentiality and also voluntary participants. Don't make it voluntary participation. Don't make it mandatory for them that you have to answer this. You have to, give me responses to the questions I'm asking. At least let it be voluntary. Let it be known to them that, whatever they're going to tell you it's a voluntary thing. You are not picking up their names and all of that. So, find a way to let them feel at ease so that they can give you very good responses. So if in terms of recording request, if you want to record, you clearly state in the interview that you're going to record a session, and you always you tell them by seeking their permission. If you're going to record it, like the audio or the video approach, you have to seek their consent. You have to ask for permission. So informed consent form, sometimes, in this part of the world, we normally, when you are interviewing something, you don't really present a formal letter to them. Of course, sometimes we do. It depends. If it's a research, you need to write. For instance, if I want to conduct a research in GCTU at the IT department, maybe on the level 400 students, I need to write an official letter to the department, and possibly I have to get some informed consent form, which I can give my participants. So in this case, I present the informed consent form by ensuring that the participants understand and also agree to participate in the interview that I want to conduct with them. Now, warm up. So that is all the ones I talked about falls under the introduction. Now, when we talk of the warm up as a way to demonstrate a thoughtful approach to the gathering of the of data. All right. So under warm-up, we normally consider the purpose and also the components, just like the introduction. So in this case, for the purpose, we create a comfortable atmosphere. We'll build some kind of rapport with the respondent, just by way of easing tension between the respondent and also the interviewer. So you can build around you can do so by, asking easy questions and also engaging them in the question. So you can start by asking easy questions, and that could be in this way. You can start with a non-threatening and simple questions to help them interviewer feel at ease. Sometimes you can even crack a joke and let them laugh, to build your confidence and their trust in you, so that they're able to, give you the right information that you are putting across, the right information based on the question that you require from them. So you establish a conversational tone and also encourage the interviewer to share their information comfortably. Then we talk about the main body itself. So we do this by addressing the core topic and also gathering the necessary information. And in this case, the component that goes into the main body are logical order. That is where the open and ended questions come in. So for the logical order, we always have to make sure that we organize the question in such a way that it is logically sequential. So we're able to move from one question to the other logically. So in this case, we find a way to move from general to specific topics when we are asking the questions. And still under the main body, we can also come out with open and also close-ended questions. So in this case, that is a semi-structured approach. So in this case, we normally would utilize a mixture of the open-ended and the close-ended questions to get in-depth and clarity of the questions that we ask the respondents. And when we do so, there is a high probability that we will have active listening, and this is possible when we pay close attention to the responses the respondent is going to give us, and also ask follow-up questions and adapt based on the participants' input. So the fact that you have it orderly does not mean you should go in that way. Based on the responses, there are certain tweaks that you probably would have in your questions to help build your question maybe for future use too as well. The cooling off approach usually involves a transition that is done merely to smoothly move towards the conclusion and also reduce the tension that exists in there. So in this case, we can have these easy questions and also find a way to acknowledge them. So by easy questions in this context, we include simpler questions. That's whenever we are moving towards the end of the questions, just to lighten and also brighten their mood. We also have to find a way to acknowledge. Acknowledgement is very key in that we express appreciation to the participants for their time and also the contribution that they have, for their contribution in coming out with the right responses to us. You always have to find a way to thank them. And of course, we will hit on the last one, which is the closure. We bring the interview to a close. We have to do this respectfully and also professionally. And in doing so, that is where the thanking comes in. We express gratitude to the interviewer's participation, and we come in with an end signal. And in this approach, what we do is we clearly indicates the conclusion, such as turning off the recording if you are recording equipment, or signaling the end of the formal interview if you are probably, recording a video session of what is going on. So by following all these well-structured steps, there is a high probability that you would be able to create a positive and a respectful environment. And by doing so, the participants will feel more comfortable, and also they also feel valued throughout the interview process. So these are key things that you should always make sure you do. Now, conducting interviews sometimes can be done remotely, and this now has become commonplace. You know, people during the COVID time, I think that is when these things are heightened. A lot of people were getting jobs, and the interviews were conducted via Zoom or Microsoft Teams. So these things have been, going on in there. So now remote interview is more commonplace now, and you see it's virtually everywhere. And especially with the use of these digital conferencing systems like the Zoom and also collaborative platforms, it makes these approach so easy. So here are some of the considerations, also the advantages associated when it comes to remote interviews. So the first one, which relates to the digital conferencing system and also collaborative platform, like the Teams, the Zoom, and the Miro platform. The Miro facility usually is more like a collaborative environment where we can have so many people collaborating to maybe a research project, and these can be done remotely. Now, these tools usually provides a feature that could be in the form of video conferencing, screen sharing, collaborative work, or digital canvases. But the collaborative work, a typical example could be the Google spreadsheet or the Google products. When it comes to the processing documents, you can have a Word documents hosting on Google, and with that you can have about 10 people working on the same Word document at the same time. That is some sort of collaborative work. The advantages of going the approach of interviewing people remotely, and these are the advantages of doing so. The first one, which I will talk about, is environment comfort. So in this case, participants are in their own environment. Potentially, they are made to feel at home, and they feel more relaxed and at ease when they are answering questions in this approach, which is the environment comfort. Time and also effort saving is also a very good advantage. In this case, participants do not have to travel. When they do this, they're able to save time and also effort. I'm tempted to say that I'm using this approach without having to travel to Accra for now. But of course, I need to still come. You will see me. At least we might have to. Our last lecture, we might have to have some sort of interaction and laugh over. When I meet you, I'll tell you how the exam is going to be. And I don't think you should worry much on how the exam will be. I'm sure all of you will do so well. Now, the next one advantage is the attire consideration. There are times, participants can be more comfortable as they don't need to worry about the dressing up for an in-person meeting. Sometimes when you're going for an interview, I've had I've had a real experience here some years back when some individual, we were looking for a lecturer in my institution, and I happened to set up Zoom was not, being used at that time. So this was somewhere in 2017. And we had an individual from Malaysia. The person had a master's in computer science. So we were interviewing him. And funny enough, this gentleman, he was actually in in a shorts and a t-shirt and lying on his bed when the interview was ongoing. You can imagine the thoughts of our Ghanaian people. This guy is not serious. That is what we normally would think and say, this person does not really wants to, teach for us. And this is an individual who was not a Ghanaian. He was actually a Malaysian. So you could see his complexion is different, and he felt more at ease being interviewed in his box, in his shorts and and a t-shirt, on his bed. There was another scenario where we had, yes, Ernest, where we had an interviewee, well, this is one thing, in Ghana, well, it's an advice to you, whenever you're going for an interview, if you can, try and wear maybe a coat or something, Of course, those ones, we have this funny mentality that when you are in coats, you are serious. And this trickles down to even in you know, in some institutions. Now, this individual was given a chance to, the interview was ongoing. He was in coats, he had a tie on. Then at a point, um, there is mark for dressing. If you are not aware, anytime I'm sure most of you are aware, when you go for interviews or you do even presentations in class, there is marks for dressing. So this person was in coats, in tie, he was seated behind his PC, and as well, that's interesting. He was seated, he was seated behind a PC and the interview was going. That time we we're using a video conferencing software, which we call Polycom. So now it gets to a point where they had to award marks to this person, a lecturer. He was applying to be a lecturer in my institution. Then one of the professors told the gentleman, okay, now we will want to see you so we can give you marks for dressing. So they told this person to get up. And the funny thing was he got up, not knowing he was wearing a boxer shorts and he wasn't even wearing a shoe. And this is a real thing that's really happened. It sounds like it's not true, but I was actually there. I saw what's happened. So this tells you that when it comes to remote interviews, people are more relaxed without having to think about what they are going to wear and so on. But of course, it's a good thing when it comes to that. Hits indeed. Yes, this is the real news. This actually happened. And of course, he will not get his full mark, although he tried to deceive people. So we have so that is about the attack consideration. You don't have to think about what you wear and all of that. Especially if you're not showing your face, you can be seated and doing your thing. Now, increased anonymity is very key in remote interviews. So remote interviews can offer increased anonymity, which may be beneficial when discussing sensitive information. There are times, students try to talk to lecturers, or maybe students try to talk to, do I say counselors? Yes, when they have issues. I think somebody tried recent final years, somebody wanted to build a system where he has not really embarked on the project yet, but wanted to build a system where there will be some kind of anonymity for students to express themselves to the counselors when they have issues. Sometimes when you are sitting directly in front of maybe a male counselor, and if you're a female counselor, you probably might not feel comfortable telling them about your problems. So a student has want to build a system that would hide the identity of that system, of people, of students, so that they can interact with the counselor. And of course, there are limitations to that. The idea is to build rapport with the student to feel more comfortable to open up to this counselor. And when it gets to the point where the counselor really does need to see the student, we should find a way to schedule, an in-person interview with a person. So there is increased anonymity. That is about it. And freedom to live. Yes, like what is happening here. We had about 100 people in here. And at this point, even if you leave, I wouldn't know that you've left but I'm sure Kwameka is doing wonders for me behind the scene and gathering people who are here. Yes, freedom to live. In this case, participants have freedom, freedom, indeed. Participants have the freedom to exit the interview at any time, providing a sense of control. So that is a good advantage for them as well. The third consideration for remote interview could also fall on logistics, technical clerks, informed consent, background, distraction, recording permissions, maintaining engagements in remote interviews. These are things that you can think about. Now, incorporating props in the interview process can, in a way, significantly enrich the experience by enhancing engagement and also providing the context that is being discussed. So here are some of the consideration and also benefits with props when it comes to interview processes. There are types of props. There are different types of props, and the main ones that we normally talk about are the three props that have been outlined in here. We have the persona, we have the prototype, and we have the scenario. Now, when we talk of the persona, this is where we find a way to create fictional characters. And in this case, creating fictional characters are termed as persona. So by doing so, we represent potential users or stakeholders. We give them the chance for them to make abstract concepts about maybe themselves or whatever that we want to discuss. And this helps them to be more relatable. So it also helps the interviewer provide insights based on these personas. So that is one type of props, which is persona, creating fictional character that represents potential user or stakeholder can make abstract concepts more relatable. We also have that for prototypes. So in this case, we have physical or digital prototypes that we can share with our participants. And this allows them to interact and also provide feedback on the potential design or ideas that we have conveyed, that we try to convey through the prototype. So that can especially be valuable in product development and also user experience research. Some of these things we have spoken about them in lecture 2. For scenario, which is also another type of prop, presenting hypothetical scenarios or real-time situations can also prompt these interviewers or respondents to share insights based specific context. So this is a good approach because it helps to understand how individuals might interact and also make decisions when it comes to certain situations. There are benefits of using, props. It helps in enhancing engagement amongst the respondents. There are tangible context that helps props provide some sort of relatable context for discussion. And in doing so, we are able to make abstract or complex topics more accessible to the interviewees, or the respondents. So there are certain things, these are some of the things that goes in there. Those that would want to read more, you can check online and read more about these. It's almost 9 o'clock and we are on slide 16. Oh, interesting. So now it's almost time, but I will find a way I'll give you the slides. Some of them are self-explanatory. I would want you to try and go through them. So if we delve into the aspect of questionnaires, there are some things that you should have in mind, valuable data collection methods. I've talked about closed and ended questionnaires. You have an idea what they are. And there are specific computer software that is being used for analysis. So for closed-ended questions, being structured and numeric can be easily processed using computer software like the Statistical Package for Social Sciences, that's SPSS. So questionnaire, we can also find a way to disseminate the questions online. So online dissemination for efficient reach. So when you administer your questionnaire online, you can reach so many people from different places, depending on the context or the objective for that particular research. So if you deploy it online, you can have your online platform allowing for the efficient dissemination of questionnaires to large populations. And also respondents can also complete questionnaire at their convenience. So wherever they are, whichever time that they have to complete it, they can complete it. But there are certain challenges when it comes to online questionnaire sampling. The fact that you've been able to come out with a questionnaire which is online and anybody can have access to it, creates some sort of unknown target population size. Sometimes you're unable to know which group of people are actually answering your question. And this can have an influence in your question, in the analysis that you want to make. If the questions are meant for people who are maybe in GCTU and you don't put certain measures in place to limit respondents from different places who probably have a link to your online questionnaire, people from different institutions can come into your questionnaire and answer. And in so doing, it might be difficult for you to know the exact people that are actually, the exact maybe information that you need to make decision or inferences from the answers that is being given by the respondents. So it's always difficult to ensure representative sample when the exact population size is unclear. Consideration of online questionnaire, there are certain things that you always have to find a way to consider. These are some few tips when you want to design a questionnaire. These are few things. So designing an effective questionnaire is most of the time very important for obtaining the accuracy, how accurate and also meaningful the responses would be. So in this case, these are some of the key tips for a questionnaire design: the question order, the tailored version, the clear instruction, the length consideration, the outlay, and the layout, and also the pacing. Just give me 5 or 10 more minutes, and we'll just close. All right. The questionnaire order, as the name says, you have to be very mindful about which question comes first, which question follows. So the sequence of questions can, in a way, influence the participants' responses. If you don't arrange it well, people will not really answer the questions correctly. You should find a way to consider grouping related questions together to maintain coherence. So sometimes when you are filling a form, I'm sure you've done web development. We have an element in HTML which we call field set, which has a legend. So a field set, for instance, if you want to know maybe personal information, can be the legend for a field set that will contain information about the individual. So that is where you can have in maybe the name, the first name of the person, the last name of the person, maybe the date of birth of the person. Those are personal information. So in web development, you can have a field set with a legend that says personal information. So in that case, you try to group related questions together to maintain coherence. And that is very key when you think about the question order two as well. So right from personal information, you can go to guardian information. So that is information about the person's guardian, whoever is taking care of the person. And that you can capture more information about that individual. So tailored version creates different versions of the questionnaire tailored to specific target population. And also you find a way to ensure that the language, and it could be the language that these people are filling out this If it is meant for airways, you make sure you have a version for airways, you have a version for gas, you have a version for trees, and so on and so forth. So tailored versions for different populations is very key when you need to get some information about your respondents. Clear instruction is self-explanatory. Length consideration is self-explanatory. Layout and pacing is also a little self-explanatory. In this case, you pay particular attention to the layouts to ensure the visual appealing and also ease to follow structure. One of my lecturers some years back will tell you, if you are even a very bad student, if you're a bad student and you have a very good handwriting in an exam, when he sees your script, because of you have a very good handwriting, he's in a way compelled to give you or dash you some interesting mark, some nice marks, even if you're unable to write very good information. So layout and pacing is quite important, So if you have a very bad handwriting and you are even the smartest student, sometimes it's difficult to read your information, and awards very good mark. So please, you have to at least appeal to whoever is going to answer your question. So in that case, when you design your questionnaire, if you have a layout that you want to put in, let it look visually appealing, more aesthetic for people, to appreciate the work that you put in there. You consider the pacing of the questions to maintain participant interest. Don't crumple all your questions together. At least the spacing in between your questions should be legible enough and should be easy to, follow. All these are key things that you think about when you are designing a questionnaire. So moving on to the next one, questions and response format. These I'm sure you have an idea of. For open-ended questions and also closed-ended questions, as you can see, for open-ended, we normally use the radio buttons. You've done web development, so I'm sure you know what it is. The check boxes, radio button makes sure you're able to make a choice of one based on a list that is available. Check boxes, you're able to select as many responses as possible. What are your hobbies? Football, basketball. You can check all those things when you use check boxes. We have what we call the rating scale. And in this case, of course, it does also fall under ended close-ended responses. So in this case, you are assigned rating on a numerical or descriptive scale. I'll show you an example of the Likert scale and also the semantic differential scale. These are how they look like on the scene. So for the Likert, you can see it's this way. You can see participants can express their level of agreements or disagreements with the statements using a range of response options. So I think I would like to use this system. I strongly agree, disagree. So this is an example of a Likert, scale. This is an example of a semantic differential scale. So in this case, we can see the answers that are available in here. We have about 7 different gaps in here, which is a scale that has been given in here. So you make a choice based on your Democratic Party, which is an example given here. So bad, good. So the closer you are to any of them, the better it is. So for instance, if a selection is made here, it means that is a 7 based on a key that has been given here. So it means you are in this Democratic Party, there's good, you had a selection of good. And when it comes to cruelty and kind, you have a selection of